Mark Sinclair, Vincent, stood outside the nightclub in the cold New York air. It was past midnight and his shift had just begun. He wore all black and had his arms crossed as he checked identification cards from people waiting to get inside. This was his job. This was how he paid his rent. But this was not his dream. Mark was 25 years old and he wanted to be an actor. He had wanted this since he was 7 years old. That was when something strange happened that changed his life. He and his twin brother had broken into a theater in New York City. They were just kids being stupid. They wanted to damage the place, but they got caught. Instead of calling the police, the woman who ran the theater did something unexpected. She gave them scripts. She told them they would be in a play. She said this was their punishment. Mark performed in that play and something clicked inside him. He felt alive on stage. He felt like he had found his purpose. Now, almost 20 years later, he was still chasing that feeling. But it was hard, very hard. Mark went to auditions almost every day. He would wake up early, practice his lines, and take the subway across the city. He would sit in waiting rooms with dozens of other actors. Everyone wanted the same thing. Everyone had the same dream. But most people would go home disappointed. Mark went home disappointed more than anyone else. The problem was simple but painful. He did not fit. Casting directors would look at him and get confused. They would ask him questions. What are you? Where are you from? What race are you? Mark had a mixed background. His mother was white with English and German roots. His stepfather was black. Mark grew up in a diverse neighborhood. He never thought much about race until he started acting. Then it became the only thing that mattered. In Hollywood, everyone needed to fit into a box. There were roles for white actors. There were roles for black actors. There were roles for Latino actors. But Mark did not fit neatly into any box. He was too dark for white roles. He was too light for black roles. His features were ambiguous. Casting directors did not know what to do with him, so they did nothing. They sent him home. The rejection hurt every single time. Mark would prepare for hours for a 2-minute audition. He would learn his lines perfectly. He would think about the character. He would imagine who this person was. Then he would walk into the room full of hope. Sometimes the casting director would stop him after 10 seconds. Sometimes they would not even let him start. They would just look at him and shake their heads. Wrong look. Not what we need. Thank you for coming. Next, Mark's friends from the neighborhood were doing well. They had chosen normal jobs. They became teachers, mechanics, office workers. They bought cars. Some bought houses. They got married. They started families. Meanwhile, Mark was living in a tiny apartment that barely had heat. He could not afford a car. He worked at night and auditioned during the day. He had no time for a relationship. He survived on cheap food and cheaper coffee. His mother believed in him. She always had. She worked in theater and understood the artistic life. She told him to keep going. She said he had talent. She said the world would see it eventually. But even her words were starting to feel empty. How long could he keep doing this? How many more years could he survive on hope alone? The nightclub job was necessary but exhausting. Mark worked from midnight until 4 or 5 in the morning. He stood outside in all weather. Rain, snow, summer heat, winter cold. Drunk people yelled at him. Angry people tried to fight him. His job was to keep order. His size helped. Mark was muscular and tall. People usually listened when he spoke. But breaking up fights and dealing with drunk strangers every night was draining. It took something from his soul. After work, Mark would go home as the sun came up. He would sleep for a few hours. Then he would wake up and start the actor routine again. Check the trade papers for auditions. Make phone calls. Take the subway. Wait in line, perform, get rejected. Go home, go to work, repeat day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. The worst part was not the rejection itself. The worst part was the reason for the rejection. Mark was not getting turned down because he was a bad actor. He was not losing roles because he could not perform. He was losing because of how he looked. He was losing because of something he could not control or change. His skin color, his features, his identity. These were the things keeping him from his dream. One particular audition stayed in his mind. It was for a small role in a television show. Mark had prepared well. He felt confident. He walked into the room and smiled at the casting director. The man barely looked up. He glanced at Mark's headshot, then at Mark, then back at the headshot. He sighed. He asked Mark to say a few lines. Mark delivered them perfectly. He knew he did. He felt the character. He became the character. But the casting director just shook his head. He said something Mark would never forget. He said Mark was too ambiguous. He said audiences would not know what Mark was supposed to be. He said it would be confusing. He said thank you and goodbye. Mark left that audition feeling destroyed. Too ambiguous. Too confusing. These words echoed in his head. He walked through Manhattan for hours that day. He did not want to go home. He did not want to face his empty apartment and his failing dream. He thought about quitting. He thought about getting a normal job like his friends. He could probably find something. He was smart. He was hardworking. He could do other things. But acting was not just something he did. It was who he was. Quitting acting felt like killing a part of himself. As Mark stood outside the nightclub that night, checking identification cards and telling people to move along, he made a decision. He could not control Hollywood. He could not force casting directors to see his talent. He could not change his face or his skin. But he could control one thing. He could create his own opportunity. If no one would give him a chance, he would give himself a chance. He had been thinking about this idea for weeks. Now he decided to actually do it. He would make his own film. He would write it. He would direct it. He would star in it. He would tell his own story. It was a crazy idea. Mark had no money. He had no equipment. He had no crew. He had no experience making films. But he had nothing left to lose. His dream was dying anyway. At least this way he would die fighting. He would create something. He would prove to himself and to the world that he belonged in front of a camera. The rejection had pushed him to this point. Now the rejection would fuel him. Mark finished his shift that night with a new feeling growing inside him. It was not quite hope. It was something stronger. It was determination. Mark looked at his bank account. $3,000. That was everything he had saved from months of working at the nightclub. It was supposed to be for emergencies. It was supposed to be his safety net. Now he was going to spend all of it on a film that might lead nowhere. His hands shook as he held the bank statement. This was terrifying, but he had made his decision. He started writing the script immediately. He wrote at strange hours because those were the only hours he had. He wrote after work when most people were sleeping. He wrote on the subway going to auditions. He wrote in waiting rooms. He wrote in coffee shops. The story poured out of him because it was his story. It was about a multiracial actor going to auditions. It was about the same questions Mark faced every day. What are you? Where do you fit? Why do you not look like what we expected? Mark decided to call the film Multifacial. The title said everything. Multiple faces. Multiple identities. Never quite fitting anywhere. The script was only 20 pages. The film would be short, maybe 20 minutes. But those 20 minutes would contain all his frustration and all his truth. He would show the world what it felt like to be rejected for something you could not control. Writing the script took 2 weeks. Mark barely slept. He survived on coffee and determination. When he finished, he read it over and over. He changed words. He cut scenes. He added moments. He wanted it to be perfect. This was his one shot. He could not afford to make a bad film. Nobody would give him a second chance if this failed. The next problem was equipment. Mark knew nothing about making films. He knew about acting. He knew about performing. But cameras, lighting, sound recording, editing, these were mysteries. He started making phone calls. He reached out to everyone he knew. Did anyone have a camera? Did anyone know how to shoot a film? Did anyone want to help with a project that paid nothing? Most people said no. They had jobs. They had responsibilities. They could not waste time on a film that would probably never be seen by anyone. But a few people said yes. They were friends from acting classes. They were people who worked in theater. They were dreamers like Mark who understood why this mattered. Slowly, Mark put together a crew. A guy who owned a camera. A woman who knew about sound. A friend who said he could edit. None of them were professionals. But they were willing to try. Mark found locations next. He needed places to film. He had no money to rent spaces. He had to ask for favors. He convinced a friend to let him use an apartment. He found a theater that would let him film during off hours. He scouted places around New York that looked interesting. Everything had to be free or nearly free. Every dollar mattered. The preparation took weeks. Mark made lists. He planned every shot. He figured out the schedule. Filming would happen over 3 days. Just 3 days to capture everything. It had to work. There would be no reshoots, no second attempts. 3 days, then it was done. Mark felt the pressure building. His $3,000 was disappearing fast. Film stock cost money. Equipment rental cost money. Feeding the crew cost money. Transportation cost money. Every expense hurt because he knew this was all he had. The week before filming, Mark could not eat. His stomach was in knots. What if this was a terrible mistake? What if he was throwing away his life savings for nothing? What if the film was bad? What if nobody cared? These questions kept him awake at night. But he had already committed. He had already spent the money. There was no turning back now. The first day of filming arrived. Mark woke up early even though he had barely slept. He met his crew at the first location. Everyone looked nervous. They were all doing something they had never done before. They were all risking their time on a project that might fail, but they showed up. They believed enough to try. That meant everything to Mark. Filming was chaos. Nothing went according to plan. The camera stopped working twice. The sound equipment picked up noise from the street. The light kept changing because they were using natural light to save money. Actors showed up late. Lines were forgotten. Scenes had to be shot multiple times. Mark was acting, directing, and producing all at once. His head was spinning. He felt like he was drowning. But he kept going. He had no choice. 3 days. That was all he had. During the audition scenes in the film, Mark pulled from his real experiences. When his character faced rejection, Mark remembered every rejection he had ever received. When his character looked confused and hurt, Mark did not have to act. He just remembered how he felt every time someone told him he did not fit. The pain was real. The frustration was real. He was not playing a character. He was showing himself. On the second day, everything went wrong. They lost a location. Someone who promised to help did not show up. Equipment broke. Mark wanted to quit. He wanted to stop and give up. This was too hard. He was not a filmmaker. He did not know what he was doing. But his crew kept working. They solved problems. They found solutions. They pushed forward. Their belief in the project kept Mark going. The third day was the longest day of Mark's life. They had to finish everything. There was no fourth day. They filmed from early morning until late at night. Mark was exhausted. His voice was rough from shouting directions and performing lines. His body hurt from the stress and lack of sleep. But as the sun went down and they filmed the final scene, something shifted inside him. He had done it. Against all odds, with no money and no experience, he had made a film. When filming wrapped, Mark thanked everyone. Some people cried. They had created something together. They had taken a crazy dream and made it real. Now came the editing. Mark worked with his friend who knew how to cut film. They spent weeks putting the pieces together. They watched the footage over and over. Some shots were good, some shots were terrible, but slowly a story emerged. The film began to take shape. Mark watched the rough cut alone in his apartment. He sat in the dark and played the 20-minute film. When it ended, he sat in silence. Was it good? He could not tell anymore. He had been too close to it for too long. He had poured everything into this project. His money, his time, his heart. But was it actually any good? Or had he just wasted everything on a failed experiment? He showed the film to a few trusted friends. Their reactions were mixed. Some people loved it. They said it was powerful and honest. They said Mark's performance was incredible. Others were less enthusiastic. They said it was rough around the edges. They said the production quality was not great. Both groups were right. The film was rough. It was clearly made with no budget, but it was also honest. It showed something real. It had a beating heart. Mark decided to enter the film into festivals. Why not? He had already spent everything. Might as well see if anyone else would watch it. He sent multifacial to small festivals around the country. Most rejected it. They sent polite letters saying they received many submissions. They thanked him for his interest. They wished him luck. Each rejection felt familiar. It was just like auditioning all over again. Then something unexpected happened. Mark got a letter from a festival in France. The Cannes Film Festival, one of the biggest film festivals in the world. They wanted to show multifacial. Mark read the letter 3 times. He thought it was a joke. He called the number on the letter. It was real. His tiny film, made for $3,000 in 3 days, was going to screen at Cannes. Mark could not afford the trip to France. He had no money left. But he found a way. He borrowed money. He crashed with friends who were going. He flew to Cannes with one small bag and huge hopes. Walking into the festival felt surreal. He saw famous directors. He saw movie stars. He saw journalists from around the world. And he was here with his little film. The screening happened in a small theater. Not many people attended. But the ones who came seemed to connect with the film. After it ended, people approached Mark. They shook his hand. They said the film was powerful. They gave him business cards. They said to stay in touch. Mark felt like he was floating. This was validation. This was proof that he was not crazy. His story mattered. His talent was real. A few industry professionals told Mark they would help him. They said they would make calls. They said doors would open. Mark believed them. He flew back to New York feeling like his life was about to change. He had done the impossible. He had made a film from nothing and screened it at Cannes. Now Hollywood would finally see him. Now his career would begin. He just had to wait for the phone to ring. Mark returned to New York with a head full of dreams and a pocket full of business cards. Cannes had been incredible. People had praised his film. Industry professionals had said his work was impressive. They had promised to help. Mark waited for his phone to ring. He waited for emails. He waited for the doors to open like everyone had promised. He waited for his life to change. Days passed. Then a week, then 2 weeks. The phone did not ring. The emails did not come. Mark looked at the business cards scattered on his small desk. He started making calls. Most numbers went to voicemail. He left messages. Nobody called back. When people did answer, they were polite but distant. They remembered him, sure. Nice film. Very interesting. But they were busy. They would be in touch. Maybe. Someday. Click. Mark felt his hope cracking like ice under weight. This was the same story all over again. At Cannes, everyone had been excited. But Cannes was in France. Now everyone was back in Los Angeles, back in the real world, back to business as usual. His little film that seemed so special in France was just another small independent project in Hollywood. There were hundreds of films like his. Thousands of actors like him. Why would anyone take a risk on him? The rejection felt worse this time because he had gotten so close. He had done everything right. He had made his own opportunity. He had created art. He had screened at one of the most prestigious festivals in the world. And still it was not enough. Still the doors remained closed. Still nobody wanted him. Mark started to wonder if anything would ever be enough. His bank account was empty now. He had spent everything on the film. Then he had borrowed money to get to Cannes. Now he owed people money he did not have. The rent was due soon. He had bills to pay. He needed to buy food. The nightclub job was not enough to cover everything. Mark picked up extra shifts. He worked more hours. He slept less. The exhaustion was crushing him. Going to auditions became harder. Mark had no energy left. He would show up tired and distracted. The casting directors could sense it. They could see he was defeated. Nobody wants to hire someone who looks beaten down. Hollywood wants confidence. They want stars. They want people who shine. Mark felt like a dying light. He was flickering out. His friends tried to encourage him. They reminded him about Cannes. They said he had accomplished something amazing. But their words felt hollow. Accomplishment did not pay rent. Festival screenings did not lead to acting jobs. Mark had a film he was proud of and nothing else. No career, no money, no future. Just debt and exhaustion and fading hope. Some nights at the nightclub, Mark would stand outside and watch drunk people stumble past. He was almost 30 years old. He had been chasing this dream for over 20 years, since he was 7 years old. That was more than 2 decades of wanting one thing and never getting it. How much longer could he do this? How much more rejection could one person take? At what point was this not dedication but delusion? Mark stopped going to auditions for a while. What was the point? He knew how it would end. They would look at him and see someone who did not fit. They would send him home. He would feel worse. Why put himself through that pain over and over? Maybe it was time to accept reality. Maybe he was not meant to be an actor. Maybe some dreams were not supposed to come true. His mother called him one evening. She could hear the defeat in his voice. She asked him what was wrong. Mark told her everything. He told her about Can. He told her about the silence afterward. He told her about feeling like a failure. He told her he was thinking about quitting. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something simple. She said the people who make it are not always the most talented. They are the ones who refuse to quit. They are the ones who keep going when everyone else stops. Mark knew she was right. But knowing something in your head is different from feeling it in your heart. His heart was tired. His spirit was broken. He hung up the phone and looked around his apartment. It was small and cold. The heat barely worked. The furniture was old. Everything he owned could fit in a few boxes. This was his life at almost 30. This was what chasing dreams had given him. He started picking up his apartment to distract himself from dark thoughts. There were papers everywhere. Bills he could not pay. Old scripts from auditions. Trash he had been too tired to throw out. Mark grabbed a handful of papers near his trash can. He was about to throw them away when something caught his eye. An envelope. It was crumpled and torn at the edge. He had missed the trash can when he threw it away days ago. Or maybe he had thrown it away and it had fallen out when he emptied the trash. Mark almost threw it away again. It was probably junk mail. Another credit card offer. Another flyer for something he could not afford. But something made him stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was fate. He smoothed out the envelope and looked at the return address. His heart stopped. The letterhead said it was from Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's production company. His hands started shaking. This could not be real. Mark tore open the envelope. The paper inside was folded neatly. He unfolded it and started reading. The words blurred at first because his hands were shaking so badly. He had to stop and breathe. Then he read it again slowly. The letter was addressed to him. It mentioned his film Multifacial. It said someone from Amblin had seen the film at Cannes. It said Steven Spielberg himself had watched it. Steven Spielberg, the man who made Jaws and E.T. and Jurassic Park, one of the most famous directors in the world. He had watched Mark's tiny film. The letter continued. Mr. Spielberg was impressed with the film. He was particularly impressed with Mark's performance. He wanted to meet. There was a role in an upcoming film that might be right for Mark. Could Mark please call to arrange a meeting? There was a phone number at the bottom. The letter was dated from 2 weeks ago. Mark felt like he could not breathe. 2 weeks. This letter had been sitting near his trash for 2 weeks. He had almost thrown it away without opening it. He had thrown it away. It had just missed the trash can by inches. If it had landed 6 inches to the left, it would have been in the garbage. It would have been thrown out with the rest of the trash. He would have never known. He would have never called. His entire future would have been in a dumpster somewhere in New York. He looked at the crumpled envelope in his shaking hands. This fragile piece of paper, this accident, this miracle. His whole life had been leading to this moment, and he had almost missed it. He had been so beaten down by rejection that he had stopped paying attention. He had stopped believing anything good could happen. He had been throwing away his mail without even looking at it. He had given up without realizing it. Mark read the letter a third time to make sure it was real. It was real. The paper was real. The phone number was real. Steven Spielberg wanted to meet him, but the letter was from 2 weeks ago. Was it too late? Had they already cast someone else? Had they given up on reaching him? Mark looked at the clock. It was almost midnight in New York. That meant it was 9 at night in California. Should he call now? Should he wait until morning? What if waiting meant losing his chance? He decided to call immediately. He could not wait. He had already waited 2 weeks by accident. His hands were still shaking as he dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Mark thought nobody would answer. It was late. The office was probably closed. He had missed his chance. Then someone picked up. A woman's voice said hello. Mark could barely speak. He managed to say his name. He said he was calling about a letter. About a meeting with Mr. Spielberg. The woman was quiet for a moment. Mark thought she was going to say it was too late. He thought she would say they had moved on. Instead, she said she was glad he called. They had been trying to reach him. Had he not received their messages? Mark realized they must have called his old number. He had changed his phone service because he could not afford the bill. He had missed their calls. Everything had almost fallen apart because of timing and bad luck and poverty. But somehow, impossibly, it was not too late. The assistant said Mr. Spielberg was still interested in meeting. Could Mark fly to Los Angeles next week? The production would pay for the flight. Mark almost laughed. Could he fly to Los Angeles? He would crawl to Los Angeles if he had to. He said yes. The assistant gave him details. A date, a time, an address. Mark wrote everything down carefully. His handwriting was messy because his hands would not stop shaking. When the call ended, he stood in his apartment holding the phone and the crumpled letter. He looked at the trash can. 6 inches. His entire life had been 6 inches away from ending up in the garbage. Now he had a meeting with Steven Spielberg. Now he had hope again. Mark stood outside the Amblin Entertainment Building in Los Angeles. The California sun was bright and warm. Everything looked clean and expensive. Palm trees lined the street. Nice cars filled the parking lot. This was a different world from his neighborhood in New York. This was where dreams came true, or where they died. Mark was about to find out which one would happen to him. He had borrowed money for a plane ticket. Again. He was going deeper into debt, but this was worth it. This was Steven Spielberg. If this meeting went well, nothing else would matter. If it went badly, Mark did not want to think about that. He had put on his best clothes. They were old, but clean. He had practiced what he would say on the plane. He had barely slept. Now he was here, and it was real. Walking into the building felt like entering a temple. Everything was perfect and professional. The receptionist smiled at him. She checked his name on a list. She asked him to wait. Mark sat in a lobby that was nicer than anywhere he had ever lived. There were movie posters on the walls, films that had made millions of dollars, films that everyone in the world had seen. Steven Spielberg had created magic over and over. And somehow, impossibly, he wanted to meet Mark. An assistant came to get him. She led him down a hallway. Mark's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. They reached a door. The assistant knocked and opened it. Inside was an office with a large desk and comfortable chairs. And sitting behind the desk was Steven Spielberg, the man himself. Mark had seen him in interviews and documentaries. Now he was here in person, standing up and smiling and reaching out to shake Mark's hand. Spielberg's handshake was firm and warm. He told Mark to sit down. He offered him water. Mark took it because his mouth was completely dry. He could barely believe this was happening. The director who had made his childhood magical was sitting across from him having a conversation. Mark tried to stay calm. He tried to act professional. Inside, he was screaming. Spielberg started talking about multifacial. He had watched it at Cannes. Actually, he had watched it twice. He wanted to make sure he was not missing anything. He told Mark that the film was powerful. It was honest in a way that most films were not. It showed real pain and real frustration. But what impressed Spielberg most was Mark's performance. He said Mark had something special on camera. A presence, a weight, an authenticity that could not be taught or faked. Mark listened and tried not to cry. These words meant everything. This validation from someone he respected so much was overwhelming. For years, casting directors had told him he did not fit. They had told him he was wrong for every part. Now Steven Spielberg was telling him he was special. The contrast was almost too much to handle. Spielberg explained that he was working on a new film. It was about World War II, about soldiers landing on D-Day and going on a dangerous mission. The film was called Saving Private Ryan. It would be big and intense. Tom Hanks was starring in it. There were several roles still available. One of them might be right for Mark. It was not a huge part, but it was a real character with real scenes. A soldier named Private Adrian Caparzo. Mark would have taken any role. He would have played a background soldier with no lines. Just being in a Steven Spielberg film would change his life. But a real character with a name and dialogue? That was more than he had dreamed possible. Spielberg asked Mark to read some lines. He handed him pages from the script. Mark took a moment to look at the words. Then he read. He became Caparzo. He found the soldier inside himself and brought him out. When Mark finished reading, Spielberg was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. He said the role was Mark's if he wanted it. Just like that. No audition process, no callbacks, no competition with dozens of other actors. Steven Spielberg was offering him a role in a major film after one meeting. Mark said yes immediately. Of course he said yes. This was everything. They talked for a while longer. Spielberg gave Mark advice. He said the industry would be difficult. There would still be rejection and disappointment. But Mark should never let anyone convince him he did not belong. Talent was rare. Authenticity was rare. Mark had both. He should protect that. He should fight for it. The conversation felt like more than a business meeting. It felt like a passing of wisdom from someone who understood. When the meeting ended, Mark walked out of the office in a daze. The assistant gave him paperwork. There would be contracts to sign, there would be scheduling details. Production would start in a few months. Mark needed to be ready. He nodded and agreed to everything. He barely heard what she was saying. His mind was spinning. He had a role in a Steven Spielberg film. His life had just changed forever. Mark flew back to New York that evening. He sat on the plane and stared out the window. The clouds looked different. The world looked different. He felt different. A week ago, he had been ready to quit. He had been standing in his apartment thinking about giving up on his dream. Now he was going to be in Saving Private Ryan. Now he was going to work with Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. It felt impossible. It felt like a story someone had made up. He thought about the letter, the crumpled piece of paper that had been 6 inches from the trash. If he had thrown it away, none of this would be happening. He would be at the nightclub, right now, checking identification cards and breaking up fights. He would be miserable and hopeless. Instead, he was flying back from Los Angeles with a role in a major film. Life could change in an instant. Everything could turn around with one piece of mail. When Mark got back to his apartment, he looked at everything with new eyes. This would not be his home much longer. He would be going to film in a few months. He would start earning real money. He could pay off his debts. He could get a better place. He could actually live like a working actor. The thought made him emotional. He had waited so long for this, he had suffered so much. Now it was finally happening. Before filming began, Mark made a decision. He needed a better name. Mark Sinclair. Vincent was fine, but it was not memorable. It was not a movie star name. He thought about his time working at nightclubs. His co-workers had called him Vin because he had so much energy. He was always moving, always intense, like fuel. And his stepfather's last name was Diesel. Mark put them together. Vin Diesel. It was strong. It was unique. It sounded like an action star. From now on, that would be his name. Mark was becoming someone new, someone Hollywood could not ignore. The months before filming were strange. Vin tried to prepare himself. He read about World War II. He learned about D-Day. He thought about his character. Who was Caparzo? What did he want? What was he afraid of? Vin wanted to honor the real soldiers who had fought. This was not just a role. This was history. This mattered. He worked out and got in better shape. He practiced the lines over and over. He wanted to be perfect. Finally, the call came. Production was starting. Vin flew to England where they were filming. The first day on set was overwhelming. There were hundreds of people working. Massive cameras. Elaborate costumes, detailed sets. Everything was professional and precise. This was real filmmaking at the highest level. Vin felt small in the middle of it all, but he also felt alive. This was where he belonged. Meeting Tom Hanks was surreal. The movie star was kind and welcoming. He treated Vin like a colleague, not like a nobody. The other actors were supportive. Everyone was focused on making something great. Spielberg ran the set with calm authority. He knew exactly what he wanted. He was patient but demanding. He pushed everyone to be better. Vin watched and learned. This was a masterclass in filmmaking. When they filmed the D-Day landing scene, it was intense. The noise, the explosions, the chaos. It felt real even though it was a movie. Vin understood why Spielberg was a genius. He created environments where actors could truly perform, where they could feel the reality of the situation. Vin gave everything he had, every scene, every take. This was his chance. He would not waste it. Filming his death scene was emotional. Caparzo dies trying to save a little girl. He gets shot by a sniper. It was a powerful moment in the script. Vin wanted to do it justice. He thought about all the soldiers who had really died, all the young men who never came home. He channeled that tragedy into his performance. When Spielberg called cut, there was silence on set. Then Spielberg came over and put his hand on Vin's shoulder. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Vin knew he had done well. The months of filming went by quickly. Every day was a gift. Vin was working on a real film with real professionals. He was learning, he was growing. He was becoming the actor he had always known he could be. When filming wrapped, Vin felt sad. This experience had been incredible. Now it was over. He had to return to real life and wait for the film to come out, wait to see if anyone noticed his performance, wait to find out if this would lead to more work or if this was just one lucky break. Saving Private Ryan came out in the summer of 1998. Vin Diesel sat in a movie theater on opening night surrounded by strangers. He watched himself on the big screen. His face was 20 feet tall. His voice filled the theater. He was in a Steven Spielberg film. It still felt impossible even though he was watching it happen. When his character died on screen, he heard people in the audience crying. His performance had moved them. Years of rejection and struggle had led to this moment. The film was a massive success. Critics praised it. Audiences loved it. It made hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office. Everyone was talking about the D-Day sequence and Tom Hanks and Spielberg's direction. Some reviewers mentioned the supporting cast. A few mentioned Vin by name. His performance as Caparzo had been brief but memorable. People noticed him. That was all he needed, just to be noticed. Hollywood started paying attention. Vin's phone began ringing with actual opportunities. Agents wanted to represent him. Casting directors who had rejected him before suddenly remembered him. Small roles were offered. Nothing huge yet, but real work. Paying work. Vin was finally becoming a working actor. Not a star. Not famous, but working. That was enough for now. But Vin had learned something from making Multifacial. He had learned that he could create his own opportunities. He did not have to wait for Hollywood to give him permission. He could tell his own stories. So while he took small acting jobs to pay his bills, he started writing again. He wrote another screenplay. This one was called Strays. It was about his life growing up in New York, about the streets he knew, about the people he had grown up with. It was personal and raw, just like Multifacial had been. Vin produced and directed Strays the same way he had made his first film. Low budget, small crew, lots of heart. But this time he had a little more money and a little more experience. The film was better than Multifacial, more polished, more confident. Vin starred in it and poured everything he had learned into the performance. He premiered Strays at the Sundance Film Festival in 1997. The film won awards. Critics praised his writing and directing as much as his acting. Vin was proving he was more than just an actor. He was a filmmaker. Then came an unexpected opportunity. An animated film needed a voice actor. The film was called The Iron Giant. It was about a boy who befriends a giant robot from space. The robot did not talk much, but when he did, his voice needed to be special. Warm but powerful, gentle but strong. The director had seen Vin's films. He thought Vin's voice would be perfect. Vin recorded the role in a few sessions. It seemed like a small job, just some voice work for a cartoon. He had no idea how important this film would become. The Iron Giant came out in 1999. It did not make much money at first, but people who saw it loved it. Over time, it became a classic. Children grew up watching it. Adults showed it to their kids. The robot's simple words, "You are who you choose to be," became iconic. Vin's voice performance was a huge part of why the character worked. He had brought warmth and emotion to a giant metal robot. It showed his range as an actor. He was not just a tough guy. He could be sensitive and caring, but the role that would change everything came in 2001. A director named Rob Cohen was making a film about street racing called The Fast and the Furious. It was supposed to be a small action film, nothing major. The lead role was Dominic Toretto, a street racer and mechanic who lived life a quarter mile at a time. The character was tough and intense but had a strong moral code. He was a leader, a family man, someone people followed because they believed in him. Vin read the script and connected with Dom immediately. This character felt real to him. Dom was someone from his neighborhood, someone he had grown up around. Tough on the outside but loyal and caring on the inside. Vin knew he could play this role. More than that, he knew he should play this role. This was what he had been preparing for his entire life. He went into the audition completely confident. He became Dom Toretto. He embodied the character so completely that everyone in the room knew he was the right choice. Getting cast as Dom was huge, but Vin did not just show up and read lines. He helped shape the character. He worked with the writers. He added depth and layers. He made sure Dom was not just a stereotype. Dom had principles. He had philosophy. The famous line about living life a quarter mile at a time came from conversations Vin had with the writers. He was not just acting, he was creating. The Fast and the Furious came out in June 2001. Nobody expected it to be a big hit. It was a summer action film about cars, but audiences loved it. They connected with the characters. They loved the racing scenes. They loved the family dynamic. And they especially loved Dom Toretto. Vin's performance was magnetic. He commanded the screen. When he was on camera, you could not look away. The film made over $200 million worldwide. It became a phenomenon. Suddenly, Vin Diesel was a movie star, not just a working actor, not just someone who appeared in films. A star, someone audiences wanted to see, someone who could open a movie. Magazine covers, interview requests, fan mail. It all came flooding in. Hollywood wanted him for action films. They saw him as the next big action hero. Offers came in for all kinds of roles. Vin was selective. He did not want to just take any role for money. He wanted to build a real career. He wanted to choose projects that meant something. Over the next few years, Vin starred in XIX playing another iconic character, Xander Cage. He did The Chronicles of Riddick, creating a science fiction franchise. He returned to the Fast and the Furious franchise multiple times. Each film was bigger than the last. The franchise became one of the most successful in film history. It made billions of dollars. It played in every country in the world. And Dom Toretto became Vin's signature role, the character that defined his career. But Vin never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the struggling actor working at nightclubs. He never forgot the rejection and the pain. He never forgot the crumpled letter near the trash can. That letter had saved his life. That piece of paper had been the difference between giving up and becoming a star. The memory stayed with him always. Vin started his own production company. He wanted to create opportunities for other people. He wanted to tell stories that Hollywood usually ignored. He produced films and gave chances to actors and directors who might not get them otherwise. He remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. He did not want other talented people to suffer the way he had suffered. He used his power to help. As the Fast and the Furious franchise grew, Vin became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. He made tens of millions of dollars per film. He bought nice houses. He took care of his family. He could afford anything he wanted. But success did not change his core values. He still valued loyalty. He still valued hard work. He still valued authenticity. These were the things that had carried him through the hard times. He would not abandon them now. Vin also never stopped creating. Even as a major movie star, he kept writing. He kept producing. He was involved in every aspect of his films. He was not just a hired actor who showed up and said lines. He was a filmmaker. He shaped stories. He developed characters. He fought for what he believed in. The struggles of his early career had taught him to fight for his vision. That lesson never left him. People sometimes asked Vin about his success. How did he make it when so many others failed? Vin always told them about persistence, about refusing to quit even when everything seemed hopeless, about creating your own opportunities when no one would give you a chance. But he also told them about luck, about timing, about the crumpled letter that almost ended up in the trash. Success was not just about talent or hard work. Sometimes it was about being in the right place at the right moment. Sometimes it was about 6 inches of space between your future and the garbage can. The little boy who had broken into a theater at 7 years old had become a global superstar. The young man who was rejected at auditions because he did not fit had created his own place in Hollywood. The struggling actor who almost threw away his big break had learned to recognize opportunity even in crumpled paper. Vin Diesel's journey was unique, but the lessons were universal. Keep going, create your own path, pay attention, and never ever give up, because you never know when everything might change. You never know when your whole life might be sitting near the trash, waiting for you to notice it. Years passed and Vin Diesel's career continued to grow. The Fast and Furious franchise released film after film. Each one made more money than the last. The series that started as a small action movie about street racing became a global phenomenon. The films played in China, Brazil, Russia, every corner of the world. People who spoke different languages and lived in different cultures all loved Dom Toretto. They loved the character Vin had created. They loved his message about family and loyalty. By 2015, Furious 7 made over $1 billion at the box office worldwide. Vin stood at premieres in different countries and saw thousands of fans screaming his name. He walked red carpets and took photos with celebrities. He was mobbed everywhere he went. This was fame at the highest level. This was success beyond anything he had imagined as a struggling actor in New York. But the journey had taught him something important. Fame and money were not the point. The point was the work. The point was the art. The point was connecting with people through stories. Vin never stopped thinking about that crumpled letter. It had become a symbol in his mind, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. He kept the original letter in a frame in his house. When he felt tired or discouraged, he would look at it. He would remember standing in his tiny apartment, broke and defeated, holding that piece of paper in his shaking hands. He would remember the trash can 6 inches away. That memory kept him humble. That memory kept him grateful. In interviews, Vin started talking about his journey more openly. He told reporters about the nightclub jobs. He told them about the rejections. He told them about making multifacial for $3,000. He told them about almost throwing away the Spielberg letter. People were surprised. They saw Vin as this confident movie star. They assumed success had always been inevitable for him. Learning about his struggles made him more human, more relatable. Fans connected with his story because many of them were struggling too. They were chasing dreams that seemed impossible. Vin's story gave them hope. Young actors started reaching out to Vin for advice. They asked him how to break into Hollywood. They asked him how to handle rejection. They asked him how to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. Vin always gave the same advice. Create your own opportunities. Do not wait for permission. Make your own film. Write your own script. Show people what you can do. And never give up, even when it seems pointless, because you never know when your chance will come. You never know when everything will change. Vin also talked about identity, about being multiracial in an industry that wanted everyone to fit into simple categories. When he was starting out, that had been his biggest obstacle. Now he saw it as his strength. He could play different types of characters. He could connect with different audiences. His ambiguous appearance that casting directors had hated in the 1990s made him a global star in the 2000s. The thing that had been his weakness became his power. Life was strange that way. The things that hurt you early could help you later. The Fast and Furious franchise continued to dominate. The Fate of the Furious in 2017 made over $1 billion. F9 in 2021 did the same despite being released during a pandemic. The series showed no signs of slowing down. Vin was not just starring in these films, he was producing them. He had creative control. He shaped the direction of the franchise. He made sure the films stayed true to their core values: family, loyalty, never leaving anyone behind. These were not just themes in the movies. These were principles Vin lived by, but Vin did not forget other types of work. He continued voicing the Iron Giant in special projects. He played Groot in the Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy films, another character who barely spoke but communicated so much. Just like with the Iron Giant, Vin brought emotional depth to a character that could have been one-dimensional. He proved over and over that he was not just an action star. He was a real actor with range and skill. Vin also used his platform to honor people who mattered to him. When Paul Walker, his Fast and Furious co-star and friend, died in a tragic car accident in 2013, Vin was devastated. Paul had been like a brother to him. They had built the franchise together. They had become real friends off-screen. Vin helped finish Paul's final film. He made sure Paul's character got a proper farewell. The ending of Furious 7, with the two characters driving off in different directions, made audiences cry around the world. It was Vin's way of honoring his friend, of showing that family in the films was real family in life. As Vin got older, he thought more about legacy. What would he leave behind? Money and fame were temporary. Films lasted longer, but even they faded eventually. What really mattered was the impact you had on people, the doors you opened, the opportunities you created. Vin started mentoring young actors more seriously. He hired people from diverse backgrounds for his productions. He fought for representation in Hollywood. He remembered being the kid who did not fit anywhere. He wanted to make sure future generations had an easier path. Vin also became a father. He had children and suddenly saw the world differently. He understood what his mother had sacrificed for him. She had worked in theater and never made much money. But she had supported his dreams. She had believed in him when no one else did. Now Vin was a parent and he understood that love. He wanted to give his children everything. But more than that, he wanted to teach them the values that had carried him through. Work hard, stay humble, take care of people. Never give up. Sometimes Vin would take his children to movie sets. He would show them how films were made. He would explain that the explosions were fake and the fights were choreographed. But he would also tell them that the emotions were real, that good acting came from truth, from finding something honest inside yourself and sharing it. His children did not fully understand yet. They were too young. But someday they would. Someday they would know that their father had almost given up, that their entire existence had depended on a letter that almost ended up in the trash. The Fast and Furious franchise announced plans for several more films. Vin would be playing Dom Toretto well into his 50s. The character had become inseparable from the actor. When people saw Vin Diesel, they saw Dom. When they saw Dom, they saw Vin. It was the role of a lifetime. The role he was meant to play. And it had all started because Steven Spielberg saw potential in a short film made for $3,000 by an actor nobody wanted. Vin sometimes wondered about alternate timelines. What if he had given up before making Multifacial? What if he had thrown away that letter without opening it? What if he had missed the phone call from Amblin Entertainment? His entire life would be different. He might still be working at nightclubs. He might have become bitter and angry. He might have given up on his dreams completely. So many small moments had combined to create his success. Remove any one of them and everything changed. But Vin tried not to dwell on what might have been. He focused on what was. He had a career he loved. He had financial security. He had a family. He had millions of fans around the world. He had created iconic characters that would outlive him. He had proven that the kid who did not fit could make his own place. He had shown that rejection was not the end. That struggle could lead to triumph. That a crumpled letter could change everything. On the 20th anniversary of Saving Private Ryan, Vin attended a special screening. He sat in the theater and watched his younger self on screen. Private Caparzo dying in the street. It was strange seeing that performance now. So much had happened since then. That role had been his breakthrough, his entry into Hollywood, but it had almost never happened. If not for the letter, if not for Steven Spielberg's kindness, if not for dumb luck and timing, Vin felt overwhelming gratitude wash over him. After the screening, a young actor approached Vin. The kid was probably 20 years old. He was nervous but determined. He told Vin that he was struggling, that he kept getting rejected, that he was thinking about quitting. He asked Vin if it was worth it to keep trying. Vin looked at this young man and saw himself 30 years ago. He saw the same hunger, the same fear, the same desperate hope that maybe somehow things would work out. Vin put his hand on the young actor's shoulder. He told him about the nightclubs, about the thousands of rejections, about making Multifacial with his last $3,000, about the letter he almost threw away. He told him that success was not guaranteed, that talent was not enough, that luck played a role, but he also said that persistence mattered, that creating your own opportunities mattered. that refusing to quit mattered. He told this young actor to keep going, to make his own film if he had to write his own story, to never stop believing in himself even when no one else did. The young actor thanked Vin with tears in his eyes. He walked away looking stronger, more determined. Vin watched him go and hoped the kid would make it. Some would. Some would not. That was the reality of Hollywood. But maybe his words would help. Maybe his story would inspire someone to hold on just a little longer, to keep going just one more day, because you never knew when your chance would come. You never knew when your life would change. You never knew when a crumpled letter would save your future.